G'day and welcome to the Inforunners. I'm Execute, joined today by Algared. How you doing, buddy?
As I said earlier, I feel like death warmed up.
Yeah, he's not had the best day, haven't you? You're just saying you just went to the docks, so yeah.
I went to the docks. The doc said, yeah, you just got to rest. And
yeah. So we'll try and make this one a little bit short and sweet for Algared's sake. Get it over and done with, but yeah, rip off the band-aid. But when we did that episode last week, Algared, with the ironclad comparison, it kind of made us think of a few extra things that we kind of want to talk about. And someone had, I believe it was Sandgroper, in the feedbacks and suggestions for an episodes, also talked about us talking about duplicate and redundant ships, and how required they are or how they are not required. And so that's what we're going to go into today.
Just as a side note to that, like even if we say a ship is redundant or not needed, if you actually like the smaller ship or that we say is redundant, if that's a ship that's your jam, well, for you then the larger ship is the redundant duplicate that you don't need. So it goes both ways. So if we favour one ship but you favour the other, it's just
it's your own personal
flip it.
Yeah, it's your own personal taste. You do what suits you. This is just a broader value proposition type thing. So I think for the first thing for me, the one that the series of ships that really comes into my mind is the only one that we have really kind of fully flushed out. We're getting very close with Medical. Medical might be the next one after this, but it would be the Prospector, the Mole, the Arastra, and the Orion. And I kind of look at that and go, you know, like a lot of people go, yes, I can see a need for every single size class. But for me, it comes around to a value proposition, which is what we often recommend here. For me, it would be get the Orion and just earn down to everything else. Because then you can take that and the extra money from the Arastra, the Mole, and the Prospector and put into another ship. Though, of course, that comes around is, I only want to do mining. Yeah. That's where the problem lies. But then can't you just save the money and not spend it in the first place as well? So,
and someone who's full into mining, like John Citizen, I think it's John, isn't it?
Yeah, it's John.
He made a side, but yeah, he's got the Orion, but there may be times when he wants to take out the smaller and just do a small mining operation. So I can see there being a value to having even in that case having a second or smaller mining ship.
Yeah.
I know one of the biggest complaints or concerns that people raise is that, but I'm only one person. I only want to do solo, and I can't. You know, the big ship is just too big for me. But I even think with the Orion, I think generally you'll be able to get by with NPCs and blades.
Yeah.
For most of the operations on that thing.
And how many missions do you reckon you're honestly going to have to do that you can then go out with an Orion and go out and buy a Prospector? I would argue the amount of money that thing is generating, you do one mission, come back, and you'd be able to buy a Prospector or maybe a Mole just completely outright.
I go back to the Xeno threat that I did. I was doing the Xeno threat with the Aurora. Was having a great time. Was earning money hand over fist, But then I went out in the Reclaimer. Not Reclaimer, the Retaliator.
That's it, yeah.
And in one mission, I basically had earned so much cash. It was like, man, if I'd been doing this the whole time, I'd have had not just enough for a Cutlass, but enough for so much more. It was. I couldn't believe how much more money I made on the Retaliator.
So I've actually taken this to memory. It was 6 times the amount.
Yeah, it was sickeningly amount. Yeah. It was just hand over fist.
But that's technically going from a small to technically a large ship as well.
It was.
Right? So
imagine,
it shows you the scale difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I'd just taken the Retaliator out, I could have easily, within 1 or 2 missions, have earned the Aurora and the Cutlass and other ships.
With the amount that you actually earned, I can't remember the exact figure, but I remember it was over the price of the Aurora. So you could have brought the Aurora in one mission.
Oh, I think torpedoing the Idris, because with the Aurora you couldn't really do any damage to the big ships.
Yep.
With the Retaliator, you were able to destroy Idrises, and that meant you were making so much money. Yeah, one mission you could have bought an Aurora because they were so cheap, or are so cheap.
Yeah.
So there is that aspect as well, and I think the Orion, when you look at the crew, I think the crew count for the Orion is 5 to 8 on the matrix.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know people say don't trust the matrix of lies because you can't, but it's the only information we've got for the crew count of the ships. And that's a detail that's related in all other aspects we've been given. So if you go to Wiki, they're taking their information from there as well. But 5 to 8 crew, I think, if that's and I'm going from memory, but that's conceivable to run, a couple of blades on the turrets, a couple of NPCs, yourself, maybe a friend. You've easily got enough to run an Orion, I think.
Yeah.
So.
And you can also see that in the medical ships as well. The medicals is probably now even more. Well, it's got in numbers. It's got a lot more things because obviously got a few. We got a vehicle in there now as well, which we I guess we technically got that in the Rock DS and the Rock as well. So again, you can start to see very quickly. The earn down economy is not a joke. The only last question is how AI is going to work and the player interaction system. And again, they were promised way back when, and kind of what you're saying about the Matrix of Lies is we can only go on what we've been told, and putting all those pieces together, I can't see a reason why you're not going to be able to do or struggle through one mission in a high security area and get a payday that will allow you to buy the ship underneath it and repeat.
And just to put a caveat there, it may take you 2 or 3 missions on those super large ships, but it's still going to be significantly less mission than you'd have to do if you're trying to do it from an Aurora or the smaller ship.
Absolutely.
And I think the classic there is the Vulture versus the Reclaimer in terms of cargo capacity.
Yeah.
So I think it was
16 times the cargo capacity, but only 2.5 times the price.
Yeah, and so when you look at that, it might take you longer to fill up the Reclaimer's cargo hold, but you fill it up. You fully fill it, and you've saved yourself 14 times. You've made 14 times extra than you could have, and
not just that, Algared. I think you hit on a point too before with the player size, because there's actually an overlap between the Arastra and the Orion, but the Arastra is 6 times smaller than the Orion.
Yeah.
So there is overlap.
I think one of the other things with the Orion and the Arastra is we know the Orion's got some form of refineries on it, but we don't know exactly how good or how big or how well they're going to work.
Yep.
Are they going to be as good as the Arastras or not as good as the Arastras? And so that's probably the only thing that's really up in the air in terms of whether the Arastra gets.
I think we can argue they're going to be better.
But I would argue, as you just said, the argument does seem to make sense that it is that they would be better because it's the top of the line ship, and the Arastra had multiple refineries, but it can't mine, and so you've got that.
Sorry, say that again. It can't mine. Yeah, it can mine. What are you talking about? You just said the Arastra can't mine. Yes, it can.
Yeah. Oh, it does mine, does it? Okay.
Yes, it does mine.
I thought it was just a refinery.
No, you're thinking of the Galaxy. That's just the refinery.
Okay.
You really are tired today, mate.
I'm out of it, mate.
It's fine. All right.
It's the same type of thing. So the medical, I can see people not wanting an Orion, not an Orion, an Endeavour.
Yep.
Because it is that Swiss Army knife. Part of its advantage is not only it's a hospital, but it's got all the other modules that you can do things with.
But again, you can always just set it to the one you want and never change it.
You can set it to the one you want and just leave it. And then you've got the choices of the Galaxy or the Apollo, and I think both of those ships are pretty much on par if you take the medical version of the Galaxy.
Yep.
But again, you've got the option with the Galaxy to do the other options as well. The Apollo, you're limited to 2 types of bed, but you get more beds. So I think the only ones that really lose out in some rates of the Pisces and the vehicles down, but we also know they've changed the way respawn will work. That every ship can respawn. It's just going to be a matter of range or how close to the target the ship you are. So
I think for me, it really comes down to a couple of factors, like I said at the start. So I think it comes down to your own personal gameplay tastes, and I think the other part of it is how much you've got to spend. Right, you and I often see fleets where someone essentially owns everything. That's their prerogative, but we often look at that and see that as an overkill scenario. But for me, if you are looking at this as a new player coming in, the one ship that you really like is, I think, all you still really need, right? I think you could literally just do a starter pack, and that's all you need. And if you want to go into one profession you really like, then probably aim for the top, because again, you can go sideways. So if you have something like an Orion, you can go sideways into an Endeavor or a Crucible. So you get repair or science or medical or whatever like that. You don't have to have the biggest of every single ship either. So you, again though, but if you want to scale it and you want to kind of save yourself some of the grind, then try and stick to the big ships. That's still where I'd be going. But again, you could just really be into mining and you want every mining thing in the game. That's your prerogative. You do you, but it comes back to it's a choice between what you're into. It's almost like a graph, isn't it? You know what I mean? So you've got one side's the gameplay you're after, and the other side is your value, and you've got to kind of pick between those two. But in my book, I think the middle line is where you want to go, where you just get the biggest of all the professions across the board, and then you got every single base covered, both value and what you want to do in the game.
From my point of view, like I do have most of the ships that are in game, and certainly a lot of the small rubbishy ships. And I say rubbishy just because they're so useless. That's wrong, but because they're so small, they don't scale up compared to the other ships I've got.
I get what you mean.
I do like taking them out, but in terms of versatility, they are redundant. When you compare them to the bigger ships.
Well,
part of the reason I've got them is because when the game started, there were so many question marks over every ship. Which one am I going to like? And back then, you know, I wasn't aware of the CCU chaining guide, and so you tended to have the ships and keep them. And
well, none of us did back then, mate. That's you know, it's all been learned.
You know,
I think that's the advantage new players really have over older backers, as we had to learn through mistakes, where they you know, they've got us here that essentially teach them as they've come along. And I don't just mean you and me, us. I mean all the veteran backers, like every org you're in, there's someone teaching them how to do it, type of thing.
And you know, so for me, that was one of the things that actually, I suppose, gave me the gotta catch 'em all bug. Just that desire to have a choice. And if I wanted to keep the savings of a cheaper ship because of the prices adjusting over time, you kind of wanted to keep them in your hangar just so you could take them out when you wanted and really try them and see what the difference was, rather than melt, unmelt. And so, I know for me that really did feed that. It become the gotta catch 'em all bug. And I do call it a bug because it was nasty. But anyway.
Right, so there's another area that we haven't kind of gone over, and I think this is an important one to talk about, and it'll go into a few different areas here, so this is kind of probably tangent a little bit, but that's modularity. That's the other one that we can look at, right? So it's one of the reasons why we do recommend ships like the Redeemer and the Endeavor and the Caterpillar and a few of the others, because they just give you so much more gameplay for less cash, right? And that's another way you can do it. Instead of just getting, well, let's take the Orion as the example we used earlier. It only does mining, right? But if you take the Endeavor, you've got a hospital, you've got a science, you've got an agriculture farm growing ship, you've got a super collider, and a few other bobs and ends that come with her. And she's essentially the same size of ship as an Orion, being a capital, right? And you can step that down to smaller ships like the Caterpillar, right? The Galaxy, and things like that. So I think that's another place you could look into, is if you are, and also it's a very useful place if you, instead of buying multiple ships, if you don't have a lot of cash, you can just buy one and go, well, I don't know exactly what gameplay I want, but this offers me 3 or 4 different ones, so I'll take that and work it out from here.
Oh, that was one of the advantages that were originally sold with the Vanguard, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
You get a base Vanguard, and you get what they called the battle upgrade kits, which was basically the module in the middle, and you swap the module out, and it gave you a totally new different ship.
And that ship is really good for someone that likes combat, because you essentially get 4 different variants of combat ships.
Just by changing out that, you know, it was like the Thunderbird 2, if it just drops out its middle section, puts a new one, and bang, brand new ship. It was that type of thing, and I think that was part of the original appeal of the ship. But yeah.
It still is a massive appeal of that ship, right? The other part, obviously, that we don't know enough about yet is long range fighters, right? Because on paper that thing's fairly tanky and fairly meta. I personally really hate the nose guns, but again, if you don't have the cash to buy multiple things, instead of buying 4, you can just buy 1 and save your money. So that's another area where it comes to redundancy, because this is a really tough conversation, because there's going to be people out there that can just throw thousands of dollars at things, but you got to remember, not everyone can do that. Again, what happens to little Jimmy that's 12 years old? He could probably barely afford the one little Aurora starter pack, let alone anything else, you know. So you got to look at this across the board. We
also consider when we started, or certainly when you started. I think it was just phased out when I'd started, but the idea was that the modules, or the different variants that we got in ships, so the Aurora, the Cutlass, well, not the Cutlass, it was the Aurora, the Hornet, and you know, those ships, and the Miss, the Misery, the Freelancer. Yep. Both those ships, I think they were the ones that we really saw with the variants, and those variants weren't originally ideas of being these are different ships. It was these are what you can do with your ship, the way you can upgrade it. It just so happened that everyone bought every variant they brought out, that they went, man, we're nuts if we just make it one ship.
Well, it wasn't really until the Zeus and the C1 turned up that we saw a lot of variants. They'd all kind of dropped back in more recent years, and the Ironclad's got a variant, but like, to give another example, the Liberator didn't have one. You know, so things like that. And then the other support
modules, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, again, but we hadn't seen a modular ship in ages either. So it's almost like all these old things have become new again, is what I'm trying to get at. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you want to add? I think we can kind of wrap it up here. This was going to be a very short and sweet episode.
Going to be a short episode, but I don't think it has been a short episode.
Yeah, it's short compared to our usual affair. All right then. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. And thank you to everyone at the end of the video that went that extra mile.
Always appreciated, never demanded or required, but definitely always appreciated.
Is there anything you would like to hear in the comments from people below? I forgot to ask.
What ships would you think are redundant or useless?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Is it capital ships for you versus, you know, and the small ships are the ones that are worth keeping, or is it the reverse? Or is it somewhere in between?
Yeah, and I'd say, is it like what I thought? Is it more of a personal choice crossed with value? Because I think that's going to kind of help determine your decision. Like, if you are really into one particular gameplay, you're going to see values in ships that other people see as redundant. Because that's how I see it. There is a personality factor, but also your personal funds, so to speak.
Well, we see that with my fleet all the time. You know, someone will say, I really like this ship. We say, why? Because I really like it.
Algared, that was for them to answer. You're not meant to give... Are you a teacher? You're not meant to give the students the answers. What are you doing? Right.
It's spoon feeding. Spoon feeding them.
You are tired, so you need to get to bed. All right, with that then, he's been old man tired Algared.
He's been the evil executor, and we're out of here. Take care.
See you, citizens.